One of the reasons why my reading life in autumn is so precious to me is because I have habits like sitting outside, maybe with an apple cider donut and a hot apple cider, and reading. I also love reading on rainy days, getting a candle lit and sitting down with a cozy blanket as well. This is my favorite to be read list to create of the year, and so welcome to my fall TBR video. The first theme that I'm sharing are books that are witchy and kind of cozy, and the first one is The House Witch by Demel Chap. This is the story of Finley, who is a chef. He is on staff with the King and Queen of Doxaria. This is a fantasy, but my understanding is it's very cozy. It is full of friendship and court intrigue, and Finley, the main character, has a familiar who is a kitten, and I just really was sold on the cover. This also has over 4 stars on Goodreads, which, you know, you can take that for what it is, but it's a very large book. It's 460 pages. My understanding also is that there is a House Witch 2 and that this does not resolve. And so if I enjoy this, I will be needing to get the second book in order for the duology to feel like a more complete tale. My next choice was also a cover by. This is The Witches Abroad by Terry Pratchett. It is in the Discord series. It's actually the 3rd in the Witches series of Discworld, and I am not reading that in order. This is actually my first Terry Pratchett book, but like I said, I saw the cover and was intrigued. This is a fairy tale upended. It's sort of a convoluted story about a girl who's destined to marry a prince, but that may actually not be truly a happy ending for her. And so when her fairy godmother meets her demise, she is taken up by these 3 characters here who are witches, and their goal is to try to save this girl from her destiny. And it's a pretty slim book. Like I said, the cover got me. So I'm excited to dive into Terry Pratchett's Discworld, and hopefully am not disappointed that I'm more in the middle of the series instead of starting it from the beginning. So the next category is vampiric. So the first book is a reread for me. It is Daughter of Darkness by Stephen Sproul. This is a book that I received in the 1990s. This is the story of Jennifer. She works in a hospital. She's what is known as a hemophage, which is basically a vampire, but she, in order to stay alive and healthy, is just taking blood as she needs it through the hospital and not actually harming anyone. But her kind of idyllic life undercover is threatened to exposure by her father, who doesn't live such an innocent life, and he is really trying to encourage her to follow his footsteps, which is more violent and more threatening to the life that she has. And so it really is a familial relationship book, really focused on her grandfather, her father, and her and their relationships. I don't remember this having even an inkling of romance in it. So again, it's a reread, but it has been 20, almost 30 years since I read this, so we will see. I did check it out on Goodreads because I don't hear a lot of people talking about it. And while it does have a low number of reviews, the people who reviewed it said that they really enjoyed it. And so I'm excited to relive some of my youth through it. Another vampire, although this one also has witches in it as well. This is Shadow of Night, which is the second book in the Discovery of Witches series by Deborah Harkness. I adore the Discovery of Witches TV series.
Once the world was full of wonders.
I watch it every year. I'm currently in the middle of watching it with my husband since autumn has officially started, and we're actually in the second season. So the thing that's nice about the TV series is that each season follows the 3 books in the original trilogy. This follows Diana, who is coming back to Oxford. She now has her PhD. She has studied alchemy. She's a historian, and while in a family of witches and friends with witches, does not really practice magic herself. She doesn't really have very much, and it's very out of control, and so she really kind of just ignores that part of her life. But upon her return to Oxford University, she goes to the Bodleian to do some research for her latest paper, and she calls up an alchemical manuscript that seems very old, and when she opens it, it reacts with her in a very intense, intriguing, and unusual way. That interaction alerts all of the creatures that are in the surrounding area, and by creatures I mean witches, vampires, and demons. So once they're all alerted in that general vicinity, one in particular, who is Matthew, who's a vampire, makes it his business to find out more about Diana. He has been searching for this book that she was able to access for hundreds of years, and so he's very intrigued by how she was able to get it, and they develop a friendship, dare I say, a love story, and the series progresses from there. I would say that the books are more complex with characters and a lot of movement, and so this is the one time I would recommend the TV series over the books, but I love this series so much that I also enjoy reading the books along with it. The next category is dark academia, or really what I would call gray academia. So for a middle grade, light gray academia, I have M.A. Larson's Pennyroyal Academy. This is the story of a girl who attends the Pennyroyal Academy. This is a place where you would train to help fight dragons and battle witches. It is set in a grim fairy tale kind of world. I love when middle grade fantasies have maps. And this has actually been on my TBR for a few years, but I am determined to get through this one this year. Next is a YA dark academia, but again, much lighter than your If We Were Villains or Secret History by Donna Tartt. This is Ruling Destiny by Alison Noel. This is the second book in her Stealing Infinity series. We follow Natasha, who really is neglected, I would say, not well taken care of. And she befriends someone who convinces her to go to the club. And in this club, she basically has a vision and is given the chance at that point to either join the Grey Wolf Academy, or her memories can be altered so that she doesn't remember it anymore. She decides that the life she's living is really not satisfactory, and so she decides to go to this Grey Wolf Academy. In this academy, there are heists involving high-priced art and artifacts, and time travel as well. So there's a lot of magic in there. There is some romance in it. I will say in the first book there is an attempted SA that happens that is a little bit jarring, but it isn't graphic. I really enjoyed the first book. I loved the academy feel. I loved the time travel part. There is a mystery surrounding her, Natasha, the main character's parentage. And so I went ahead and grabbed the second book when it came out this year, and I'm excited to continue this series. The next category is what I would consider kind of Gothic Thriller, and the first book that I am hoping to get to this year, because it has been in my TBR more than 1 year at least, and that is The 13th Tale by Diane Setterfield. This is the story of Vida Winter, who has written 12 enchanting stories that she has this like cult-like following for. And she's kind of spun all of these different personalities as her life has progressed. And she comes across a young woman who is Margaret Lee, who is a biographer, to finally open up and share her true life story. The blurb on the front calls it eerie, so I am really excited to read this. To me, it kind of has Hazelwood by Melissa Albert feels. Next, I have Mary's Monster by Lita Judge. This is a graphic novel that is all in black and white. It's almost like a book in verse. And this details Mary Shelley's life before and then when she wrote Frankenstein and then after. And I'm intrigued. I don't know that much about Mary Shelley, and so I'm just really intrigued to find out more about her. The blurb on the cover really seems to indicate that there's a lot of Mary Shelley's life that is buried into the story of Frankenstein, and so I'm intrigued to uncover that. Next, I have The Oath by Frank Peretti. This is a hugely thick novel. From my understanding, I've not ever read any Frank Peretti. My understanding is that he is a Christian author, but that this is kind of horror thriller book. So I find that intriguing that as a Christian writer, that would be the genre that he would be writing in. I will say the thickness is a little bit daunting, but this is the story of a mysterious death in the woods that was purportedly committed by some sort of monster, some sort of evil. And it is up to the townspeople to hide the truth of what's going on there. And it is up to, I think, like a detective and a sheriff to uncover what is actually going on in this town and in the surrounding woods. My research has said that this is an allegorical novel, and so I'm also intrigued by that as well. So we will see how well I do at getting through this thick tome this autumn. Okay, so this is one that I found at a little free library, and it is Beautiful Creatures. It is by Cami Garcia and Margaret Stahl. This is a Southern Gothic fantasy romance, which, again, I find very intriguing. It is the story of a boy named Ethan who has lived in his home southern town his whole life. He is ready to leave, but in comes Lena, who is the female main character, I think, and she has this mysterious power or curse, and somehow she and Ethan are connected. He seems to know that and is trying to figure out how they're connected. So I just love the idea of the swamps and these like crumbling plantations all being wound up into this book. And so I'm hoping to get to this one as well this fall. Next, I want to share a couple of books that I have chosen to read for the BOOKAthon, which is a group readathon that is hosted by some young ladies who really enjoy middle grade books. This is actually happening from October 16th until the 22nd. And so I've made some choices around those books. They are also doing a group read, which is the Bellwood game, I think. I've looked into it and it's not the easiest to get at my library, and so I probably won't do the group read, but they do have 3 prompts and I wanted to share what I've chosen for each of those prompts. So one of the prompts is to be set in October. I just finished The Haunting of Aveline Jones, which would have been perfect because that is set in October. But I also have wanted to read Something Wicked This Way Comes by Ray Bradbury. It's a stretch probably to call it middle grade. And when I did a little bit of research, it's definitely been said that this could be a middle grade book, and so I'm putting it into that category. I know there's a little bit of language in there, so that's something to be cautious of, but it does have 2 main characters who are in their teens, Jim Nightshade and William Holloway. So one of the things that I love about Ray Bradbury is that he does not do anything by accident, and so William Holloway is the sort of more innocent, hallowed character, and Jim Nightshade is struggling more with the darker sides of life and his personality. I think they both have different struggles, but their reactions to them make one more prone to making poor decisions maybe than the other one. So the premise of this is that on October 24th, in their little town in Illinois, there is a traveling carnival that comes. And this traveling carnival seems to actually have very nightmarish qualities to it, and the boys have to kind of wrestle through, along with, I think, their parents, how to get through the arrival of this carnival and how they are going to behave. The next prompt is that there is a bird on the cover. It's actually really difficult to see on this, but she does have like a bird tattoo on her arm. This is The Clackety by Laura Senf, and to be honest, I am not 100% sure that I'm going to be able to read this. I have a very low tolerance for really spooky books. So the premise here is Evie lives in Blight Harbor with her aunt Desdemona. The only rule that the aunt has for her is to avoid the abandoned slaughterhouse at the edge of town. However, I think the aunt goes missing and Evie decides that the abandoned slaughterhouse is probably where she would be, and so she goes there. She meets the Clackety, who is a creature who I think lives in this abandoned slaughterhouse, and the Clackety makes a deal that he will help her find her aunt if she helps him catch the ghost of a serial killer who is roaming around. So again, sounds so creepy. So I think she ends up agreeing. She's got to get her aunt back and having to go into the other world and try to figure out how to find this ghost and avoid like memory stealers and soul catchers and all kinds of stuff. This is not a very thick book to be filled with so much creepiness. So we'll see how this goes and if I'm even able to do this. The last prompt is a word, I guess, in the title that has to do with death. And so I chose The Ghost of the Midnight Lake by Lucy Strange. I've actually read The Secret of Nightingale Wood, which is also kind of a creepy book. So this has a lot of potential for this readathon prompt. And the story here is that it's the late 1800s and an earl has died and a young girl is then now kicked out of her ancestral home. Her name is Agatha, and she ends up having to go to this tiny falling down cottage with someone who is a stranger who is saying that he is her father. And she realizes or discovers that there are ghosts and hauntings at this nearby lake, and that another ghost has a mystery of her parentage. And so I think she and Agatha bond together to try to resolve some of the mysteries and confusions that are surrounding them. Next, I want to share the category of fantasy. I think most of it is YA, but some of it is adult. The first book is After the Forest by Kel Woods. This is a beautiful edition of a fairy tale retelling mashup. I am actually listening to this on NetGalley. NetGalley is a really great way to get books that are being published in the future, and that way I will not be reading this. It will go on my shelf and I can just listen to the audio version without trying to get in line on Libby. This follows Greta, who is of the Hansel and Gretel fame. She, through discovering the house in the woods that she and Hansel had to get saved from as children, this is them as young adults. They are living together in a little hovel in the town that they were originally from. It turns out that she took the grimoire from the witch that she had pushed into the oven. And this grimoire gives her instructions on how to make delicious gingerbread, and it's how they're making their living. Well, end up being threatened with an inability to possibly not be able to stay where they are living. There are all kinds of different plot lines in here, all threading back to the fact that Greta probably has more powers than she realized when she originally ended the witch when she was a child. Next, I have been on a Rebecca Ross kick since I started A River Enchanted earlier this year. I just really love her books. They are popular and mainstream, but they are very wholesome and sweet. So this is Dreams Lie Beneath. This is a beautiful lit joy. copy with a inside dust jacket artwork. Cover is very shiny. And this is a signed copy. One of my favorite ways to get books that I have not gotten in a subscription is through Macari or Pango Books. So this is the story of Clementine. She is going to become a territory warden as a magician and protect her small town. But there are two magicians that end up showing up and they end up wanting to challenge her. And there's this centuries old conflict that she gets drawn into. There's revenge that's happening. One of these magicians that come to challenge her ends up bringing her into finding out about some secrets that have been happening, and a slow burn romance starts to develop. I do think that, as the title implies with The Dreams Lie Beneath, that there is something going on with how nightmares are involved in the town and in the magicians. But again, I love everything that she has written, and so I am sure that I will love this as well. Next is another YA fantasy. This is Godkiller by Hannah Kaner. This is such a beautiful book. This is the story of Kisen, who is a godkiller. Godkillers are forbidden in her kingdom. She works for the king, and her job is to kill gods. She's good at it. She has no qualms about it because her family were killed by a god in the past. And so she's like, this is my destiny. This is what I'm going to do. Well, all of this comes to a halt when she meets a young girl whose life is tied to a god. And so she cannot kill this god as she's supposed to without harming the little girl. And so they end up creating this kind of mismatched group where they are going to have to travel somewhere to figure out how to separate these two lives together. There's like burgeoning civil war. There are people after them. And so I think it's a very intense fantasy novel. My understanding is that this is the first of two, so I think it's a duology, and that the end of this does not resolve, that you're really waiting for the second one to come out. The next YA fantasy that I am looking forward to reading this fall is A Curse for True Love by Stephanie Garber. This is a very popular series. It's Once Upon a Broken Heart. This is the third book in the trilogy, and I think it will end the series. Stephanie Garber wrote the Caraval series trilogy, and one of the villain characters in that series, Jax, who is a fate, plays a prominent main male character role in this Once Upon a Broken Heart series. In this third book, we will see the continuance of Evangeline, Jax, and Apollo as main characters. Evangeline experiences unrequited love and makes a deal with Jax one fateful day in a church that if he helps to solve her problems of unrequited love, she will then give something to him in return. It turns out to be a big mess. It doesn't work out as Evangeline expects, and she ends up going to this northern kingdom with her sister and is expected to marry one of the princes in that northern kingdom. This book has vampires and ancient prophecy. Evangeline has this beautiful like rose gold colored hair. Jax, who again was a villain in Caraval, we start to kind of unpack some of his childhood experiences and understand, just as you would with any villain character, why he is the way that he is. I personally prefer this series to the Caraval series, and I'm really excited and hopeful that Stephanie Garber ends this in a satisfactory way. Dance of Thieves by Mary Pearson is the story of a young man whose father passes away, and he now becomes the ruler of this outlaw kingdom. Most people consider him to be legitimate, even though they are an outlaw kingdom. But there is one queen who does not. She has a vengeance, a score to settle. And so she sends a street thief into this kingdom to talk with this new ruler. to do an investigation, a secret investigation, and to report back to this queen. Well, of course, this street thief is female. She learns there is more to this young man who's now this ruler than she actually realized. They each are kind of carrying out these secret missions and not really trusting each other, hence the dance of thieves. But they really do need to start trusting each other because there are events that are in motion that would challenge both of them and the kingdoms that they are in charge of and from. Next is The Witch and the Tsar by Olesia Salnikova Gilmore. I fell prey to this gorgeous Goldsboro copy. I mean, it's just stunning. And so I will either get this from the library or listen to it as an audiobook. I love Russian folklore retellings. I've recommended Russian folklore retellings in many of my videos in the past. This one also has Baba Yaga as a character in it, but I love that this takes a different perspective on her. Instead of being this hag with nefarious intentions, Baba Yaga is a fighter for the oppressed in old Russia in the tumultuous time before Ivan the Terrible comes into power. And I love that she is kind of seen as good. I'm really looking forward to diving into this adult fantasy novel. Next, I have The Book That Wouldn't Burn by Mark Lawrence. This just came out this year. It is actually the first in a series. This is the story of two people who are connected in this vast, mysterious library. So the boy has been kind of held almost captive-like in this chamber that is just filled to the brim with books. And there's a young girl who actually lives on the outskirts of town who's being trained as a librarian. And they meet in the library unexpectedly. And that is all that I know about it. It is very thick, but I love books that are set in libraries and surround libraries and librarians, and ideas of book-filled chambers and magic just is so enthralling to me.
Thanks so much for watching. Until next time.